Well, you don't. Do you believe that Jesus rose again from the dead? Literally.
I cannot answer that question. And the reason is because, okay, let me think about it for a minute, see if I can come up with a reasonable answer to that.
For some reason, Jordan Peterson has a real tough time answering this question. But let me be clear. I think Jordan Peterson does not believe in the bodily resurrection of Jesus. I decided to see if there were any other examples of Jordan Peterson struggling to answer a question on whether he believes something or not. I found a few videos and I searched some keywords like I don't believe or I do believe, and it became very obvious to me that on certain topics, Jordan Peterson has no problem stating exactly what he believes or what he doesn't believe.
I believe that the human race can do anything it wants in the next 30 years. As I believe that the Logos is divine. And I believe this to be the case, is that you're neurologically adapted to a universe where meaning is the highest instinct. I do believe that there's a transcendent ethic. And I do believe that it touches on the metaphysical. Like, I believe we are in a war of ideas. That I believe that the risk of stating that this is dangerous and should stop is way less than the risk of going along with it. Because I also believe in hell, although what that means again is, subject to interpretation.
Because I don't believe that other people have the right to determine what language I use, especially when it's backed by punitive legislation.
I don't believe that using your pronouns is going to do you any good in the long run. I actually don't believe that at all. I believe that human civilization progresses and maintains itself when we respect people who've earned respect. And that's partly why I don't believe that freedom of speech is just another value. I think that's preposterous. I think that if you claim that, then you know nothing about Western civilization and history. I didn't say that women shouldn't be striving for the top or anything like that, because I don't believe that for a second.
So I have a theory that Jordan Peterson struggles with this question because he knows that he has a big influence on a lot of Christians in North America. And I think he believes that the myth has to be believed in order for society to function. But I also found this clip.
People often ask me, do you believe in God? Which I don't like that question. First of all, it's an attempt to box me in a sense. And the reason that it's an attempt to box me in is because the question is asked so that I can be firmly placed on one side of a binary argument.
Jordan Peterson doesn't seem like the type of man who cares whether or not people box him into a certain side of an argument. But in this next clip, I think Jordan Peterson gives a clue on whether he really does believe in the bodily resurrection of Jesus.
I act as if God exists. Now, you can decide for yourself whether that means that I believe in him, so to speak. But I act as if he exists. So that's a good enough answer for that.
So I guess the real question now is, does Jordan Peterson act as if Jesus Christ literally in bodily form rose from the dead? Does Peterson act as if Jesus is his Lord and personal Savior? Did Jordan Peterson get baptized? Does he partake in communion? Is he making disciples? Is he evangelizing the good news of the gospel? Does he pray for his enemies? Does he repent of his sins? Does he wash other people's feet?
I would say that at the moment I'm agnostic about that issue, which is a lot different than saying I don't believe that it happened.
That's very interesting.
I can't explain why. When I get to the New Testament in my biblical lectures, I'll spend like 6 hours trying to explain what I think about that. But one of the things I have come to learn over the last 15 years in particular is that the world is a very, very strange place. It's far stranger than we think. And what we don't understand about consciousness and its relationship with the body would fill many books. And you could say the same thing about our relationship with time and perhaps corporality and vulnerability and death for that matter. So I don't understand the structure of being well enough to make my way through the complexities of the resurrection story. I would say it's the most mysterious element of the biblical stories to me, and perhaps I'm not alone in that. I mean, it's the central drama in the Christian corpus, let's say.
Jordan Peterson really sounds like Deepak Chopra right there. But I did a search on what Deepak Chopra thinks about the bodily resurrection of Jesus, and he answered this way in a very general way.
Well, I think personally both East and West versions of God are mostly mythical and not historical.
I don't believe that it's reasonable to boil it down to something like, do you believe that or do you not believe it? It's not, it's...
NASA put people on the moon. Do you believe this, Jordan Peterson? Is it reasonable to boil this down to, do you believe it or do you not believe it? Genesis 1 makes the claim that the earth existed before the sun. Jordan, is it reasonable to boil this claim down to something like, do you believe it or do you not believe it?
I don't know the limits of human possibility.
This sure sounds like an argument from ignorance to me. I don't know X, therefore Y is possible. Well, at this point in time and looking back throughout human history, I think we have a very good idea of what the limits of human possibility are. Can humans fly unaided? Can humans run faster than the speed of sound? Can humans live without oxygen? Sure, it's possible that a person might have rose from the dead, but is it probable to you, Jordan? Do you give it a 1% chance? A 10% chance? Or do you give it a 50-50 chance because Jesus either rose from the dead or he didn't?
Pastor Jeff, how do you know there's a God? And I say it's simple math. God either exists or he doesn't. So let's be cynical. Worst case scenario, there's a 50-50 chance. And I like those odds.
That's wrong.
So, you were saying?
You've confused possibilities with probabilities. According to your analogy, when I go home, I might find $1 million on my bed, or I might not. In what universe is that 50-50?
I could say the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ symbolizes the necessity of the psyche to undergo a sequence of deaths and rebirths in its attainment of the ideal.
Oh, yes, that's what I expected you to say.
Just because that's true doesn't mean that's all that's true about it. Because I also don't know. So here, for example, in order to stay alive, it's necessary to get the balance between death and life right in your psyche and your physiology, because death keeps you alive. Your cells die and regenerate all the time. And if you die too much, then you die. And if you don't die enough, well, then you also die. You end up with cancer or something like that. You have to get the balance between death and life right in order to survive. I don't know what would happen if you got the balance between death and life exactly right. And I don't know what the upper limits are to human possibility, and neither does anyone else. And human consciousness and human beings are capable of, we don't know what we're capable of, I suppose, is the final answer.
There's a big difference in saying that we don't know for certain what humans are capable of and what is probable or not. Is it probable that Jesus walked on the water, healed the blind, and rose from the dead 2,000 years ago based on the evidence that we have? Let's say I had a time machine that could go back to the Palestine area about 2,000 years ago, and we could jump from week to week, month to month to make sure we don't miss anything. And that you and I could see for ourselves whether Jesus actually rose from the dead in bodily form and appeared to people over the course of 40 days. But before we leave, you are forced to make a bet between 1% to 100% of your net worth. Jordan, how much are you willing to bet that Jesus literally, physically rose from the dead? What you're willing to bet here is probably a good indication of whether or not you believe.
And so I'm unwilling, for a variety of reasons, which I can't explain. They're tangled up with experiences that I've had that I can neither understand nor explain. But I'm unwilling to rule out. I'm unwilling to rule out the existence of heaven. I'm unwilling to rule out the existence of life after death. I'm unwilling to rule out the idea of universal redemption and the defeat of evil. Now, I know perfectly well that all those things can be well conceptualized metaphorically. I know the metaphorical conceptualizations, but I'm not willing to make the claim that those ideas exhaust themselves in the metaphor.
I wonder if Jordan realizes that many atheists say the exact same thing, that we're not willing to rule these things out, that we could be wrong, and that we're willing to change our mind based on evidence. But many atheists have at least the gonads to admit whether they believe something or not, especially those that care about it and have studied this issue.
But there are things I'm not willing to dismiss the mysterious, because I've experienced the mysterious in a variety of different ways, and it's very mysterious, very.
My guess is Jordan Peterson is like most religious people, Christians in particular, that have had some wonderful, amazing experience in his late teens, early 20s. And that, like most people, when they're in a situation where they're in high stress situations, they're sleep deprived, their hormones are raging, they're making the transition from youth to adult, they're trying to figure out what kind of person they're going to be. That's the time in life where a lot of these mysterious experiences happen. And I bet this is what happened to Jordan Peterson, and this is why he is more reluctant to say that the resurrection, the bodily resurrection of Jesus didn't happen, because maybe he thinks they're related in some way. But Jordan, instead of being asked if you believe in the bodily resurrection of Jesus, and you answering that you're just agnostic and unwilling to rule it out, I'm going to play a clip of a young man who's going to state 3 beliefs. And Dr. Peterson, I want you to listen very carefully to these 3 beliefs. And my question to you is, do you believe these 3 things?
I believe that God lives on a planet called Coma. I believe that Jesus has his own planet as well. And I believe that the Garden of Eden was in Jackson County, Missouri.
I cannot answer that question. And the reason is because, okay, let me think about it for a minute, see if I can come up with a reasonable answer to that.